Welcome. We are talking today about beginning a single adult ministry. And want to ask you some questions about beginning it, because we have a lot of people that are wondering, how do they start? So if you were going to start a ministry today, thinking of small and mid-sized churches too, what would you do? How would you start? What steps would you take?
I think number one is you pray. And you gather friends who are interested, have a passion with you. Find those people first, secondly, and then pray together and say, hey, I want God's leading in this.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, another thing you really need to do pretty quickly is talk with your senior pastor about it. Share with him the need. Share with him what's on your heart and the need that's out there for single adults. And not just the negative, but the positive that single adults can bring to the table for any local church, and probably already are largely unrecognized. But talk to him about that and get his support and get his input and get his ideas and have him on your side from the beginning. That can make a huge difference.
When you say positive, what can single adults bring to the table? You mean helping in the church, or resource?
Oh, absolutely. In most churches, single adults are a tremendously untapped pool of volunteer time, of talent, skills, abilities, even finances. People don't think of them in that way, but there are lots of single adults out there that are doing quite well and just don't feel a part of the church. And if they were, they would come and bring all their resources with them, including dollars and cents.
After you talk to the pastor, have a survey. How many young single adults you have at church, and are they interested in this kind of ministry? So from that survey, you can know what model to take or what you want to do with that single adult ministry.
Most churches have a database, right?
Right.
Yes.
Where you could find out how many different age groups there are in the church. They call it their church home.
I also think, Dennis, that you could have a singles ministry within a church, but you can have it community-wide. And maybe there's other friends who are in other churches that you could begin pulling together and pull more pastors together. Say, hey, can you help support this? Can you help encourage us? Guide us?
I think pastoral support, as Darcy said, is probably tantamount and most helpful in starting your group, and also taking the survey, as Liz said. But I think perhaps before maybe starting a class on Sunday is to maybe start a fun event. Have a fun event to kick it off.
Yes.
And that seems to bring a lot of
More
folks
will come that way.
together quickly. And then from that you can follow up and perhaps put a class together. I would also suggest some kind of service or civic-minded event to bring cohesiveness and purpose to the group.
Yeah, going back to that, you also want peer support. The survey is going to help you establish not just the need in the church, but it's going to help you establish your peer support. The key is don't do this alone.
Right.
Don't do it alone.
Wow.
Establish some kind of a team that has equally, go to your pastor with the team, but you need that support right from the beginning.
There probably are other interested single adults, but you have to find them and get together and talk about it and go to the pastor, like you said. Yeah, we need support, definitely.
Yeah, and you want to determine what kind of model you want to use, and sometimes the number of people that you have interested will influence the type of model that you decide on, and whether you remain within that model, because you might start off with a small group and it might grow into nearly a church group, or it might turn into a citywide group.
Jason, you mentioned model. Dennis, you wrote a book recently that mentions some of the models. Can you explain what a model means?
Well, sure. Basically, in a nutshell, I think there are many different models. I've seen them around the country. There's the discipleship model, which is a Bible study, teaching, and smaller group. Then there's the outreach model, which is designed to attract new people, and it's mostly, I think, topical teaching on personal issues, felt needs, with discussion. And of course a Christian, but not a Bible study. Then there's the small group model, like you mentioned, Jason, where you do small groups. You keep it 10 or 12 people in a group, and you can meet in the home or in the church. Then there is the educational model, which is a workshop that a church could do on a weekend or for 3 or 4 or 5 nights in a row on some issue. Then there's the contemporary service. I see young adult ministries doing that, and some single adults. It's a service with a band and a worship and a preaching, teaching. And then I think there was another one, the social model. Some churches just social activities, that's all they do. And all those models can be seen on the National Assemblies of God website, singles.ag.org, and they can be found. So yeah, I think you're right. You got to think, what model do you want to do?
Yeah, Pastor Craig, he hybrided two of them.
He what?
He hybrided two of them, where you have a large group that breaks up into small groups and gives people conversation time.
And what's important about that is that if you don't feel like you have the manpower to have a contemporary service, there's an option for you
Yeah.
to start off with something differently in one of the other models.
Yeah, definitely.
But when you go to the pastor for support, also go with what benefits the church, so he can see and realize the need of the single adult ministry.
Yes.
What about the, as you're starting a ministry, the image, the word brand, and how you come across to the community and to the congregation? What would you say about that?
Well, you have to be deliberate in what your single adult ministry is going to be. You have to be deliberate from the beginning, because the culture is going to want to form a mold for you.
Yes.
Based on culture, expectations of what singles are or what singles want. And you have to have a presuppositional decision from the very beginning that says, we are not going to follow cultural norms. We are going to be something different. And we're going to be biblical. We're going to be fellowship-based. We're going to be scriptural. We're going to have boundaries in our group. From the very beginning, that can become part of your mission statement, part of your purpose statement, but you must decide that and stay with it and promote that.
Did you hear that big word, presuppositional?
Presuppositional, yes.
Okay, for our audience, what do you mean by that?
Well, these are presupposition is your root definition
Okay.
of what you really are, and the culture has set presupposition for what singles are, and we've talked about that in the past, and that's not what the Christian single adult either wants to be or should be, and it certainly isn't what should define a single adult ministry in a church.
That's right. I think Liz and Craig hit on a couple of important issues in that I think you do need a mission statement, a vision statement to show your pastor if you are in a church based, and otherwise I think it's important that your mission statement is one that your constituents help to form, help to write. So if you're moving along now, you're in your third or fourth week or third or fourth month of having events, it's time to choose that leadership team, which is another story, but to have something that this is what our group is based upon. These are the precepts or the tenets that our group is based upon. So get them involved in writing that to show your pastor or to show the community.
Rich, I also believe that it takes time. A singles ministry doesn't bloom overnight.
absolutely.
And so give yourself time, don't push yourself, don't expect that it's going to be a booming singles ministry
That's
just real fast. It takes step by step, it takes baby steps. And don't overextend yourself either. Be realistic on what things you can do or cannot do.
That's right. And as a small church, perhaps with just a volunteer leader, you look at some of these models that Dennis went over. You can't bite all that off at one time. You have to look at it with prayer, with support of those that you bring around you. Figure out, okay, well, hey, we're going to start with a discussion model. We're going to show a video and do some discussion, or whatever fits you or fits the personality of your church or of your area, of your demographic you're trying to reach. And you go for that, just one baby step at a time, as Darcy was saying. There's a basic starting point, but you stay true to that vision, you stay true to that purpose, and that keeps you out of a lot of trouble down the road.
And consistency.
Yes.
You want to meet consistently so that people know that you're going to be there.
So in other words, maybe once a month is not enough.
Usually not. No. Once a week.
Once a week is
Once a
good.
week if you can handle
If
it.
you could.
If you can, yeah. Even if you're not doing the exact same thing once a week, but meeting once a week.
Single adults, don't they? They go home to an empty apartment or house, or a dog or a cat or a child. They don't go home to a spouse like I do as a married person, and so they really relish and want the connection that they do. What about finances? How can you finance a single adult ministry? There's going to be some costs. What would you say?
Well, that's a hard one, because when you come before your pastor is going to ask that question: how are we funding this thing? And if you show real benefit to the church, then he's going to buy into a funding model or a funding idea quicker. The other ways to fund, of course, is through offerings and giving from the folks. Either they support what they like, or event-based giving as well. But the challenge of funding is always before us. It doesn't matter what you do, if it's worth doing, it's worth paying for.
So you recommend taking an offering at your class or group, right?
Yeah, some kind of a way.
And then would that offering go through the church, a budget to show the church, hey, we have money coming in, we have expenses too, right? Would you do that?
I think
Yes.
so.
As a matter of fact, I know that here recently we were meeting about 90% of our budget at a large church for single adult ministry. Everybody who was coming just realized that sometimes I have to pay my own way to an event, or I've got to support this ministry with food and the other materials. And again, if they see the purpose that this is benefiting the kingdom of God and the church, they will give. They will give. They've got disposable income. Many of them do for that ministry.
And if you're meeting needs, you find that they will give towards that, they'll support it.
A lot better. That's right.
I find people in the country, they say, well, there's only 10 of us and the church is not going to give us any budget. And, do you find that churches will budget other ministries before single adult ministry? Why is that, if so?
Well, I think sometimes there's the stigma that, again, that single adult ministry is this auxiliary ministry in our church, and we don't really understand it. That might come from the top. And until we understand it, we're not going to give it the status that, that maybe others feel it deserves. Though we know it's one of the best untapped resources, as Kevin said earlier, for the kingdom.
Go ahead, Darcy. Sorry.
Dennis, I also think that we just have to even ask our churches for money. Sometimes we don't ask, thinking they don't have any or won't give us any. But I think all we have to do is submit what our needs are.
The
to them.
squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Yeah.
Eventually, not maybe
Yes.
right away, but eventually.
Right.
I think a lot of times single adults are already doing a single adult ministry. If they're gathering for any purpose at all in their church, they just haven't defined it. Bringing definition to what you're doing causes more interest to be put towards that.
I like that. It's good.
And you just simply redefine what you say. We're already meeting for fellowship. We're already going bowling together. We're doing this because we have an innate need to be together and to fellowship. Let's put a name to this thing and bring some structure to it. And the funding probably would be less of an issue when you consider you're already spending the dollars anyways, doing it together.
Sure. And there are no mere ideas. There are no small ideas. I think some of the greatest inventions, the greatest organizations started, over in a coffee shop somewhere between 5 or 6 people. Some of the greatest ideas ever birthed. So you're already doing it. So when you approach your pastor, well, we already have a group pastor of 5 or 6 who are studying together, praying together, fellowshipping together. We want to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And
I have seen across the country, tell me if this is true, in most single adult ministries that are 35 years old and up, that's basically what it is today, 35, some even 40 and up, there are many more women than men coming. Why is that, and how do we attract men? Is that true that there are usually more women than men?
Yes, it's definitely across the nation. I've seen that. I think women are very relational. I think we enjoy getting together, so are much more free to do that. Free to admit we're single. As far as we don't see quite as many men at times, and perhaps we need to make sure our events, our surrounding is really male friendly, male inviting.
Surrounding, so it's not so flowery, or what do you mean by that?
Less doilies on the table and more
Yeah.
transmissions.
Transmissions. Oh yeah.
Dennis, I also think some of this stigmas that the single adult ministry itself battles against, we talked about it in another video, can keep guys from coming as well, because if they perceive it as a place where people have problems and weakness, and I got to go there and talk to somebody about what I'm dealing with, guys tend to be very closed off sometimes, and they don't want to share like Darcy mentioned the ladies do. Guys don't. You got to pull it out of them if they feel like they're going to be thrust into an environment in which they're going to have to open up or be challenged to do that, or they're going to have to face you know, a weakness or a situation in their life. A lot of times they just rather steer clear of that. So, you know, some of the stigma, I think, as well, can drive them away before they even get in the door.
Or just have events for men specifically, so that could attract them to come. It's just
Great
for
idea.
men.
Great idea. And that can start with a breakout session, some evening where just men get together to talk about those issues affecting single men. Can run the gamut of that. I think aesthetically, somebody mentioned make it more man-friendly, men-friendly. No, I agree with that. I know that we used to put out Super Bowl settings during the Super Bowl, and you know, something to invite them in. We would invite single men who were Christians, who were coaches in the area, to come and be a part of our teaching one night. You know, it's something you have to work at.
And the men you have, get them involved.
Exactly.
Get them to do your announcements. Get them to be on the greeting team so that you have teams of guys and gals. I mean, it's always nice being greeted by a pretty gal, but it's always nice being greeted by a nice, firm handshake where the guy doesn't try to break your fingers, but he gives you a good, strong grip.
I like what you said, the greeting team. Jason, you mentioned a guy and a gal. I'm a big believer in having one of each at the door.
Absolutely.
Not two women, not two men.
Absolutely.
Because we don't know, if there's two guys there greeting, a woman comes in, she's just been dumped by a boyfriend, or she just went through a divorce, she doesn't trust men perhaps. And these two friendly guys are already there to greet her, and she's a little unsure about that. Same thing with two women at the door. It turns a guy off sometimes if there's no men right there. So I like what you said, a man and a woman at the greeting. Get the guys involved and put them there. How else do you use men to invisible positions?
I like what Rich said as far as using them as special speakers from time to time, particularly guys that have the ability to speak from within your group for announcements and things. That's also very good. Also, male-oriented topics is very good. Financial seminars is one that could be great. Spiritual gifts, another good one for male orientation.
It's important to mention too that the single adult ministry doesn't have to reinvent the wheel every time there is a need. That if you are lucky enough to be involved in a church that has a successful men's ministry, what you can do is you can plug into that. You can recruit among the guys at the singles group. Say, hey, the men's ministry is having a guys' night out this Thursday night. Let's get a bunch of us single guys together and let's go together. And you take advantage of the men's breakfast that's happening at Saturday at your church or the retreat. But you do that as a group of singles. As joining in that larger life of the church body, and that can be very powerful as well.
If you were to say one key thought to people starting a new ministry in a small to mid-sized church, what was one thing you'd like to emphasize in a sentence or two? You'd like to emphasize to new leaders, new people, new ministries? We've talked about a lot of things here. What would you like to emphasize?
I would like to say you're not alone. There's a lot of resources out there. The Assemblies of God has a fantastic website that you oversee. It has loads of information, so you're not alone. There's many others that you can be calling on the phone for support too. So to me, it's an exciting time to be involved with singles ministry and tap into those books, those videos, DVDs of different materials that are out there.
That's the singles.aag.org.
Yes.
Okay, good. Somebody else, what would you want to say?
I say don't be discouraged in well-doing. Keep at it. Keep pressing on. God will reward your efforts. And when you don't see or feel like something is being accomplished significantly, that's when He's most likely to bring across your path somebody that is to affirm your ministry. Remember those things. I used to keep the cards that people would send me in ministry in a separate file, and I would go back to those cards and read those cards that someone sent me whenever I was discouraged.
Yeah.
Because there was a time when somebody said something good about it.
Good. Excellent.
I think perhaps also, I agree with that definitely, but to take the time, if you are a leader of the singles, take the time to learn as many individual journeys, about as many individual journeys as possible. And let them know that, your path is unique. You may think you're like at 10,000 other people, but God brought you on this journey in a unique way. And you're valuable for the kingdom. You're profitable for the kingdom. And so that's a good start. That takes work because it's relationship. But it's a process over time that will really pay big dividends, I think.
There are many types of single adult ministries, aren't there? We talk about models. There's also the divorce recovery. There's also single parent groups. There's a widowed group. There's so many models. But I think it's important that we try something if we have a passion to do something. We can't do all the models. We can't do it all. We can't meet all the needs. But jump in and do something. And that's what you've done. I think you've helped people today to see some of the needs and how to do it. Thanks for your comments. It's great. Starting a ministry is a huge need across the country, whether it's a small church or a couple churches together, like you say, or maybe even a parachurch ministry, people getting together.
Can I just say one last thing, Dennis, about what would we say to those listening? And I would say, be yourself. I think too often times in ministry and in the church we compare ourselves with other ministers, or we hear something and we think, oh well, it needs to be that way or it's got to be that way. What I would say to those listening is that you're not listening to this by accident, and you're in that position, or God has put single ministry on your heart for a purpose and for a reason. And so just by virtue of you being where you're at, you're the right person, and so it's okay that you can be free to be yourself. And so if it's a discipleship model that works, if it's a social model that works, be yourself and allow the Lord to use you as you get that thing up and going. And God will bring people, and again, it doesn't have to be all things to all people right out of the gate, but be yourself, and then the Lord will bring other people to your side that can grow and build that.
Along with that, Kevin, is have fun.
Yes.
Have fun in what
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
And it's worthwhile being the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yeah. Take a look at singles.ag.org, and there's a whole section for beginning a ministry there with resources, PowerPoints, materials, books, etc. It's been great talking to you today. Thanks for all your input and comments on starting a ministry.